Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And this is our second episode of our Listen, Learn, and Act initiative. And today we get to have a conversation with our Gators head coaches. And this group has had conversations with their teams, current teams, former student athletes, families. And so I'm excited that we get a chance to hear about their personal experiences and some of those conversations and things that we can all sort of take away during this time for issues related to racism and social justice. So with that, we will get started, and Denver Parler will again moderate the conversation for us. So all yours, Denver.
Thanks, Linda. Just by way of quick introduction for those of you who may not know me, my name is Denver Parler. I'm Director of Communications, and I've been here at the UAA for about 11 years. So excited to have this conversation today with our coaches. To get us started, just so everyone has the opportunity to put names and faces together, I just want to call on each of our coaches really quickly to just give us their name and how many years they've been the head coach of their respective sports. So I'm just going to run through everybody alphabetically here. So Becky Burley, will you start us off?
Sure. Thanks, Denver. My name is Becky Burley, and I'm the soccer coach, and I've been here for, I think, 26 years.
Thanks, Becky. JC Deacon.
Hi, Denver. JC Deacon, head coach with men's golf, and going into my 7th year this fall.
Thank you. Emily.
Hi, everyone. Emily Glazer, women's golf coach. I'll be starting my 9th season at UF.
Mouse Holloway.
Good morning. I am the head men's, women's track and field and cross country coach. Been here for the start of my 26th year now, and been the head coach for 18 seasons.
Thank you. Anthony Nesty. But you're on mute, Coach Nesty. Anthony, we didn't get you there. You were on mute there. Can you give us again?
I apologize. Anthony Nesty, men's swimming, 23 years, and 3rd years as head coach, men's swimming and diving.
Awesome. Thanks. Kim Neubauer.
Hey, everybody. I'm Cam Neubauer, women's basketball coach, and I've been here 3 years.
Mandy O'Leary.
Good morning. Mandy O'Leary. I am the head coach of the lacrosse team, and I've been here 13 years.
Jenny Rowland.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Rowland. I'm the head gymnastics coach here at UF, and I just completed my 5th year here at UF.
Brian Shelton.
Morning, everyone. Brian Shelton with men's tennis. Been here for 8 years.
Roland Thornquist.
Hi, guys. Roland Thornquist, and I am starting my 20th year in Florida.
Awesome. Mike White.
Hey, Mike White here with men's basketball. I've been here 5 years.
And Mary Wise.
Mary Wise with volleyball, and the senior of the group, starting our 30th season here at UF.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you bearing with us as we introduce. I just wanted everybody to be able to have an idea of names and faces as we go through, and the discussion, I think, will flow a little more freely with that being out of the way. I just want to start as the recent demonstrations and protests that were sparked by the killing of George Floyd, along, on the heels of the news of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. How do you all react to the collective expression of the pain and outrage that we've seen in our country? Brian, can we start with you?
Sure, Denver. I think it's a long time coming. I think these things don't happen overnight. When you see that type of outward expression, starting from really the Black community, it's a long time coming. I think the injustices, not only here in this country, but around the world, have been going on for a long time. And I feel like when I look at what's been going on over the last 6 months, especially with the pandemic and everything else that's associated with it, I kind of always try to think to myself is, what's God telling us? And I think that my faith is something that's really important to me. And so through that time, I kept thinking, what's the message? We need to slow down, and we need to think about what's going on in the world, what's going on in our country, and what do we need to learn, right now, as we pause from work, as we pause from our daily routines, what message should we be taking? And then you saw the violence, kind of the brutality. And I think the Black community started by saying, enough. And I totally get it, and I totally understand it, and I think that was it was the right time for this type of movement, where I feel like more people felt like they had a voice, and there's also more of an audience. I think the world has been on pause, and so they had time to finally maybe listen. And because there was a recognition that people were starting to listen, I think it brought more people out to express their feelings, what they've been going through, what they deal with on a daily basis, just the things that are just not right in our country. And I don't think it's only Black, white. I think it's a lot of people can relate to this, and that have maybe not gotten a fair shake, or have been mistreated, or different groups that feel like they've been neglected. And so I think it was just an opportunity to first get that out there so people would take notice, and then from there, I look at the expressions, a lot of people will go to the riots. Well, why are they rioting? That's not right. And, not everybody has the same level of maturity to deal with issues in a way that other people want them to. And it doesn't excuse some of those acts. But at the same time, I think it was, I was more tolerant of some of those things, knowing that we would eventually get it right and there would be more peaceful protests. And there's been so many great examples in the past in history with, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and on. In my sport, Arthur Ashe, and how he dealt with things that just weren't right. And so there's so many great examples that I think we can lean on from the past to try to help move this thing forward in a positive direction. So yeah, I guess those are my thoughts initially when I saw it. It's about time. It's something that needed to happen. It was the right time because people were willing to listen, and not only listen, but ask the questions of what can I do, So a lot of things there, Denver. I think it's a time that we've all had to be able to reflect and kind of look at our own house and try to make sure that we start getting our own house in order.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Mandy, can you weigh in there for us?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Brian. I think, the unjust and, unfortunate murder of George Floyd, and, obviously I think it ignited a fire in people, that they're just not going to sit by and let these things happen. And, and we need change. We clearly need change. So, I think across the board, people of America, we're fighting for change, and we need change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Mandy. Becky? Can you
I think building off both what Mandy and Brian said, change is definitely necessary. And I think when you look at the George Floyd murder, it was so graphic, and it came right on the heels of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and it was just so compact. And then combined with the fact that we're in a pandemic, so people are at a different state. There's a lot of unemployment. People are in a different mental state with that. And we were in this place where the world wasn't going 100 miles an hour because we're in the pandemic. So people had to listen. They had no choice. And when you have like graphic evidence of something like that, along with those conditions, I think it just made it ripe for change. And, one of the things to build off what Brian said too, about how sometimes people look at people's reactions and they maybe judge those reactions. There was a Brene Brown quote that I really liked where she said, in order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. And so I think it's hard to to judge how people should respond to something like this, because we all only know how we're responding.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks, Becky. So as these demonstrations were fresh, near their peak, some of you shared some personal messages publicly, and I just want to know what was that like for you all? Being open about yourselves and your experiences, or potentially maybe seeing, your reaction to seeing what some of your colleagues said at that time. Mouse Holloway, can we start with you?
Absolutely, Denver. It was while it wasn't difficult for me to share what my feelings were, on the other hand, it was difficult, if that makes sense, because it brought up a lot of, bad feelings, bad emotions, and things that I've been dealing with for a long time in my life, things my family dealt with. And so, it was very emotional. It took me, the thing that I shared, it took me a while to get that out of me. I welled up, I cried, I did a lot of things during that time. And so that was, I needed to be said, and I said it, but it was difficult to get it out. As far as some of my colleagues, I think that some of my colleagues did a wonderful job of expressing their feelings and emotions and trying to understand, if you're not an African American, what we're going through. And at the same time, I was also disappointed in some of the reactions I got, some of the things that people said to me and about what I wrote and how I felt. And then, I think I had a conversation with Linda Teeler that really opened my eyes that, everybody doesn't have the same level of courage. And because I have the courage to do things doesn't mean that other people are going to have that same courage. So I'm not going to judge people because they don't have the courage to stand up and say the right thing and do the right thing. I'm going to let people be who they are. But it's a very emotional time for everyone. And so I'm going to take care of my spot and try to make my spot better. And then hopefully we can grow from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Miles. Roland, can you weigh in maybe on some of your reaction?
Yeah, I think that my family, it's been really eye-opening for my family, not just with the team, but for my family. We've had some great discussions, and I think that as a family, we've always felt like we were on the correct side, philosophically, against racial injustice and racism. But we've sort of been sitting on our couches and quietly condemning these things that we see on TV. And for really the first time in my 30 years of being in the United States, I think we feel now that we can actually publicly condemn these things too. We have the courage, and we have we see everybody else react to it. And now we're sort of, quote unquote, off the couch. We are posting stuff. We're increasing our dialogue. We're even giving money to organizations purely dedicating to correct these issues. And so I think more families like my family feel like they now can actively engage, we should have done for many years, candidly, but we feel now like, and I think that's how we move the needle on this, that we now getting more people engaged. And frankly, it's going to take people and families like mine and ours to really engage more, to really move the needle. And I do think and hope that that is exactly what's happening now.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Roland. Brian? You're on mute here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Roland more. I totally think that, what I've heard from my colleagues, both with what I've read, things that they've posted, but also things that I've heard because they've talked to me about them or asked me the questions. And one of the common questions is, what can I do? And because obviously it's going to take action. I mean, we could sit here all day long in our offices or our homes and talk in theory about what we need to do to rectify this thing. But unless we get off our couches, like Roland said, and actually, step up and act, and nothing changes. And so I think, the first part is kind of, is listening and learning. And then what do you do with the knowledge that you have? Does it just stay in your own head, or do you actually try to apply it? You know, I think everyone that's on this part of this deal today, all these coaches, we're all leaders. We're all leaders in our families. We're leaders of our teams, of our staff. We have a responsibility as leaders to lead. And leading is not just sitting back behind a desk and talking about it. It's about living it. And it's about talking to our players and to our kids and our children and stuff like that. Like Mouse said, you know, you got to take care of your spot. And it's so important for us. And so what I've seen from my colleagues is reassuring to know that, number one, they care. They're questioning where they've been at and where they need to be and what they need to do. And I think those are the things that are really important moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam?
Thanks, Denver. I had a pretty real conversation, pretty raw conversation with one of my colleagues, one of our assistant coaches, Eric Lang Montgomery, not long after the George Florida incident. And she really brought to light some things that I was totally unaware of, and really compelled me to reach out to some of my friends, some of my colleagues, some Black males, to really learn and try to gain a better vision of what they experience. And a couple of huge conversations I had were with Brian Johnson and one with Mouse. And it was so eye-opening to me because I was so unaware of the blind spots that I had. And Mouse shared some personal things in regards to his experiences through growing up in an impoverished community. And one of the most striking things he said to me, because you always learn that you can overcome things in life, that you can better yourself, that you can get to certain places where you can overcome things. And he said one of the hardest things for him has been where he came from, and having this dream that once he reached a certain level, that he would not have to deal with these microaggressions, these instances that he shared with me that I was totally blind to. And that really struck me because, you know, I know social status is one thing, but you know, here's Mouse, who's just a great man, a great leader of young people, picked to be our United States Olympic track and field coach. And he's sharing with me things that he deals with daily that I could never fathom. And so it just really opened my eyes to show me blind spots, and to have what he referenced earlier, the courage to ask friends, hey, you know, what have you experienced? What have you dealt with? And that's taught me to, you know, before I was afraid to offend people, to ask or to acknowledge it, because I was too afraid and wasn't operating with enough love and courage, I think. And so I just appreciate having those people in this room with us that have been vulnerable, been real, to share their personal experiences and to help me learn, and to help all of us learn and listen to what we can do for what's next. It's been very impactful.
Yeah, and you know, you talk about blind spots. The thing about blind spots is, like, we don't realize that they exist, right? And so we have to actively seek those out. JC, can you weigh in on this one for us?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on Cam there, I had an amazing conversation with Brian Shelton that was very eye-opening for me. You know, when I got to Florida, I was 31 years old, and, you know, walking into a pretty big job, and Brian's just always taken me under his wing, and he's been a huge mentor for me, and someone I really look up to. And it was just, I thought, you know, naively, it's 2020, that we're past this, and to hear the things that he has to deal with, that he has dealt with in his career growing up as a tennis player in a you know, white majority sport. It was difficult to hear that my friend and someone that I look up to has to deal with that, has to, you know, put up with that type of stuff. But I've got a lot to learn. That's what I've realized. You know, and it's on me to, you know, not just be a good person myself, but to teach my players and my kids to try and make a difference. And Roland kind of mentioned that earlier, is, you know, we can't just be quiet and treat people right in our own way. We've got to go out and impact our players and make sure they're making a difference too. And then that can kind of exponentially, hopefully help things. But yeah, just hearing Brian speak about some of his experiences and his kids are amazing. He has a daughter and a son who are two of the most impressive college students you'll ever see. And to hear that they have to deal with some of this stuff on a daily basis, it was heartbreaking. And but hopefully this is a big time for change, and the country's going to get a lot better, and hopefully the world's going to get a lot better through it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, JC. So I want to ask what maybe the greatest takeaway or lesson from the last month that some of you have learned, either from one of your colleagues, from one of your teams, or maybe about yourself. Mary, can we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Denver. I think what I could add to the conversation is that for as long as we've been here, we've tried to create in our program a safe place where we respect one another, where we're judgment-free, where no matter your background, race, color, or creed. And what this experience has taught me is that our program isn't, no matter how safe it is, it's not enough, because at the end of the day, they leave the gym. And what I've learned from our current players, what they've helped me understand is that working on the inside is a start, but it's not enough, because when they leave and their life experiences aren't as safe and supportive as they are in the locker room, then that's why we have to speak up, because we have to make a difference more than just in our families and with our team. And that's what I think we're all trying to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mary. Anthony?
Yeah, thanks, Denver. I grew up in Suriname, South America. So, and I came to the States in '85, and then, you know, in Suriname is a small community. When I left, we only had probably about 300,000 people living in the entire country. So I came to the States, I felt indifferent. And then obviously I was treated indifferent, but I had to adhere to my moral compass that was obviously derived from my faith, what my parents instilled in me, the practical principles of good moral conduct. To piggyback what Mary said, our core values on our team are pretty simple: honesty and respect. But respect is such a huge thing. If you don't respect yourself, the chances of you respecting others, it's not happening. So I encourage our team to not only respect themselves, respect others, be honest. And my dad, God rest his soul, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he always told me, you always have to tell the truth, because the truth will never hurt you. And lastly, obviously, one of the golden rules per se: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat others the way you like to be treated. And I think if you look what's going on right now, we have to respect people, we have to be honest, and we have to treat others the way we want to be treated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anthony. Emily, can you chime in here?
I think for me, one of the biggest lessons, in the past month or so that we've been talking about this is just the importance of having the actual conversation. I think this is the first time in my life that I've been involved in these conversations, and, really felt like it was the right time. And certainly I have a lot to learn. I've been doing a lot more listening lately than talking, but trying to find my voice in all of this. So as coaches, we signed our name to, a pledge about a month ago. And it was really important to me. I wanted to make sure that that was something that I felt like I could live up to after the fact. And one thing that we said in there was that it wasn't going to stop by just putting that on social media, that we needed to continue the conversation. That's why I felt like today this would be really important, and it certainly can't stop here. So I just think for me, it's profound to continue the dialogue. I think it's important. I think we need to just make sure that even after today, it doesn't stop. We keep it going, and that's something that I'm committed to doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Emily. Mike White?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Denver. Great stuff, guys. And I apologize for the technical difficulties on the front end. What have we learned through this process? So much, Denver. An incredible amount from so many different people, from reading, watching documentaries, conversation with family, conversation with you all, and then conversation with my guys. You know, I've learned a lot from the Florida Gators men's basketball team. You know, secondly, I think that that there's momentum. You know, that this time, despite being so uncomfortable at times and challenging at times, it's also inspiring and exciting. That you know, for the first time in this cause, you've got white people peacefully protesting in numbers with black people and really people of all colors. Third, if I were to tell you the third thing that I've learned the most, or the third aspect, it would be overall the lack of what I think we're taught about Black history in school. And there's so much of it that I've learned here lately, you know, from, I couldn't quite describe what systemic racism was, you know, 2 months ago, nearly as well as I could right now. What exactly does that mean? What does it stem from? And what does white privilege mean? Redlining, GI Bill, microaggressions. What happened in Tulsa and why? And how much words really matter. And then fourth, I would say, very, very important for all of us to understand that not being racist is not enough, right? We need to be a part of the solution and be anti-racist. Dr. King said the moderate is more dangerous than the blatant racist. Racism is evil. It's not enough to be not racist, right? We've got to be anti-racist. And having Black friends doesn't make you not racist. We've got to continue to educate ourselves and have these conversations.
Yeah.
That's what I've got, Denver. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Roland?
I agree exactly with Mike. And, you know, I think the most important thing that I've learned is that we have to do. You know, like I referenced earlier, that I was always in my mind thinking that I was on the correct side philosophically, but really never did anything. And now, clearly, there is momentum, like Mike said, and we have to do, we have to act. I think that's really important because we have an opportunity now with the pandemic, which obviously is terrible in and of itself, but people have time now where they didn't have time before. And I think that is one reason, I think Brian alluded to it, where, you know, these issues have now come to the forefront because people have time. They have time to really dive into these issues. And it's time for us who have been on the sideline sort of, you know, quietly condemning these things to publicly go out and speak the truth and help, not just with my family and my team, but also give money to organizations that are dedicated to create change and be a part of the solution. So that's really probably the most important thing that I've learned.
Thanks, Roland. Can you all describe maybe a moment in the last month that was either inspiring, heartbreaking, or enlightening in a way that maybe kind of took you by surprise? Emily, can we start with you on this one?
Yeah, I would say that I've certainly been inspired over the last month. For those of you that don't know, we meet about once a month as a head coaches group. And, you know, the idea is to share ideas that will make us better coaches, but also make our teams better. And so it was about 3 weeks ago that we had, as a group, probably our first conversation about racism and social injustice. And the idea was to, you know, educate ourselves, but also talk about good ways to impact our teams. And I didn't say anything in the meeting. I listened the whole time, but I was definitely inspired and certainly a big piece of that came from Coach Holloway. And he referenced it already today in his conversation with Linda, just talking about having the courage to talk about these things. And I was there, like, I didn't know what my courage was at that point. You know, I don't know that I had any. I felt uneducated. I felt naive. And I've just really enjoyed being able to listen to all the stories. And he shared something at the end of the conversation, which I thought was really important. It was like, well, what's next? You know, what's the next step? What can we do? And he just talked about, you know, for someone like in my position who's just finding their voice in regards to this, he talked about it starts in your home, you know, so you're in your home, and it's important to make sure that it starts there with your spouse and your children, and that you're raising your children the right way, the next generation, that you're saying the right things and acting the right way. And of course, we all have a voice within our team. You know, we don't have a very diverse team, actually lots of different countries from around the world, but racially not a lot of diversity. But in some ways that makes the conversation with my team even more important, because we have to know what our voice is as a team, and we have to be sure that we're living our lives in the right way. So I've just been very inspired by everybody's stories, and certainly feel like I'm getting closer to finding my courage and my voice and talking about this, and just grateful for the education that I've been able to have over the last month.
Absolutely. Thanks, Emily. Becky, can you chime in here?
Well, I just want to give a little shout out to Emily, because although she didn't say anything in that meeting, this meeting was her idea. So she really was the one who kind of put this together. And I also want to give a little shout out to people like Linda, Val, who's on the call, Kim Green, all who've been like huge resources for me through this. This has been really difficult. And, you know, I'm going to go in a little different direction of the question you asked, Denver. Like, I had a situation happen to me actually just a week ago that was not inspiring and troubling for me, because I was with some people who I know very well, and we were having dinner. And at the end of the evening, this person brought up, I don't understand white privilege. Like, I don't even think that's real. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, first I was a little taken off guard, because I'm thinking to myself, like, how is it possible to not understand white privilege in this environment right now? But this is also, like I said, somebody that I know very, very well and have a lot of respect for. And so I said, I think we're talking about, you know, years and years of systemic racism and injustice. And she said, well, you know, slavery didn't happen in my lifetime. There's nothing I can do about that. And I was like, well, yeah, but we do have, you know, for-profit prisons, mass incarceration, things that are happening right now that we can do something about. And so then I left that conversation. It was awkward for sure. And I felt like I didn't really make much change in that conversation. And so I started trying to figure out, like, okay, what's a better way to talk to somebody about white privilege that may not really understand it? And I came across this one statement that really kind of made it clear for me. And it said, white privilege doesn't mean that your life has not been hard. It simply means that your skin tone is not one of the causes of your struggle. And like, to me, that really simplified it. And I wish I had had those words at that moment in that conversation. But I think my point about that is that there's still a lot of people who, even in the current environment, even with all that's going on, that aren't going to understand it. And I'm not sure we're going to change every single person. But for me to have that uncomfortable conversation, I was doing that for myself and for my team and for people that I know that I think I need to stand up for in those situations and not just be silent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you make a good point that these discussions are going to be uncomfortable at times, for sure. Tim, can you chime in here and talk about this one for us?
Yeah, sure. I'm Tim Walton. I'm the head softball coach. Getting ready to start my 16th season here. So yeah, I was as a male coaching a female sport, I have a tendency to really become defensive for my own people, my own players, my own family to a certain degree. And so I have a story of a couple of my players were on a team of about 12 players playing professional softball, which isn't a very big thing in the United States. Most of our best players go overseas and play for big money. But in the United States, there's probably around 5 different teams of probably less than 100, maybe 120 athletes at the most. And this team was called the Scrapyard Dogs out of Texas. And they were getting ready to play the first softball game through the pandemic and through really the whole everything that's gone on in the United States and all over the world. So this team get ready to play, and they line up on the lines, both teams on their respective sides for the national anthem. And the quote unquote general manager of this team posted the picture and posted a site. And my wife reads me this post, and I remember this, like we were waiting for my son to get out of basketball practice, and she said, "Tim, oh my gosh, what have they done?" And you read it and you go through the events, and the events that transpired there was this team of only 12 players walked away from their professional contracts, the only money they're probably making other than a couple little endorsement deals. Most of the players play for the United States national team. A handful of players are just roster fillers and kids that want to play or women that want to play past college. And so long story short, they did what they had to do and walk away from their contract, quit their team. They formed their own team, and in less than 24 hours had their own t-shirt of a new team to play, again, against another professional team. So that was very inspiring. And what makes it difficult for a professional softball player, which, most people would criticize, what's the point? They're doing it because they love it. They're doing it to grow the game. They're doing it to grow a lot of things. So in my small circle, it was probably one of the most proud moments I've had, from inspiring to a lot of things. But it really brings the next question of what do we do? And I ask that question amongst our coaching group a lot. This isn't a t-shirt. This isn't an armband. This isn't a wristband. This is really about, creating, quality lives for every human being on this planet. And I was very inspired by these professional women to really not only do something that was going to inspire others, but it's going to inspire change, that you can't have anybody speak on your behalf. And if you are going to speak from the heart and do it with love. And I think that as competitors, a lot of people get very competitive and very defensive, but in that moment, and still to this day, I'm very proud of those athletes for really sharing their love and doing what was right, and very proud of them.
Thanks, Tim. JC, do you want to, can you speak to this as well?
I guess, one thing that just sitting back and watching this whole thing is I have 2 daughters. Sydney's 2 and Dylan's 5. And Dylan is one of my favorite people on this entire planet. And one of the reasons why is she loves everyone she meets. And it doesn't matter what you look like, where you're from. If you want to play with her and you want to be nice to her and swim in the pool or whatever it is, she loves that. She wants to be a part of that with anyone. So how does that change? Like kids don't feel a certain way. They just want to have fun and want to enjoy life. And I see it in Dylan every day. So where does that change? And I think that's what I'm trying to pay attention. Mostly, Roland touched on it earlier. We've got to do something, and it starts in our own spot. Mouse mentioned that. So for me, it's hopefully my 2 daughters are going to be leaders as they start going into school and going into high school, where they can stop conversations that are happening. They can stop, hate that's being spread. And I'm trying to figure out where in the path of growth and maturity does Dylan's love for people and love for just anyone wanting to have fun with her change. So as a parent, it's interesting to look on, and I'm just trying to learn as much as I can. It was, I got to hit some tennis balls with Brian Shelton's daughter and son a couple weeks ago, and just looking at how professional and mature they are. I got a lot to learn as a parent, and like everyone's saying today, I hope I'm learning of how we can make a small difference, and I certainly want to make sure I do that in my 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, JC. So I want to talk a little bit, and this is something that has kind of been brought up in terms of why this discussion is moving forward. Brian and Becky, you talked about in the situation with the pandemic where people have slowed down. You know, Roland, you talked about, you know, how we see other people now, you know, getting off the sidelines, and that helps us. But, you know, there were protests after, you know, Michael Brown was killed, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, and on and on and on. But it never, I don't think, reached the scale, of course. So what do you think is particular to this moment, and particularly with white people joining in these movements? Mandy, can you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a white female, you know, I look at Mouse, and I'll never be able to walk in his shoes, nor his wife Angela or his son MJ. I don't know their experiences, so it's up to me to be able to try to relate and to educate myself and to learn, you know, what he and his family go through on a daily basis, and to be able to educate myself, because then I'll be able to educate, you know, my players, my family, my friends, and so that, you know, eventually all of our experiences, you know, will be the same, and it won't be dependent upon the color of our skin. So again, for me, it's just really important to continue to educate myself. I mean, I grew up in a family where we opened up our home. My father was a phys ed teacher and a coach of football, wrestling, and track and field. And so I grew up always opening up our home to his players who needed a place to stay. Their houses burned down. They were in a bad family situation. So we had kids of all colors staying at our house, all growing up. So I was very attuned to, you know, what they were going through. But then, you know, as kind of Emily said, you know, you kind of like go through life, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's in your face again. And I think, you know, these protests are just another part of, you know, showing that we need to do something. And as I said before, we need change.
Thanks, Mandy. Mouse, can you build on that for us?
Sorry about that. I was muted. I mean, for me, you know, this brings about a lot of emotions. I think that, and it's not just blacks. I think whites as well. You know, we're tired, pissed. You know, enough is enough. And I think everybody agrees that it is time for a change. That it's just got to stop. And it's just systematically, it's just got to stop. I think that because people have mentioned, because of the pandemic, people had time. You know, we're a working society, we're a busy society, and things like this would happen, and people would pay attention to it for a short period of time, and then they just go back to work. They go back to their lives and their careers. Because of the pandemic, people really had time and the energy to really focus on what was going on. And so I think that's why there's been so much attention paid to it, because people had the time to pay attention to it. But I think overall, I commend everybody, you know, all the whites out there that have had the courage to stand up and speak, and then will continue to have the courage to speak, because, you know, it wasn't easy. And people have lost friends over this. I've lost friends over this. But it's a conversation that has to be had. And the way I look at it, those people weren't my friends anyway. So I'm good with that. But I totally agree that, you know, just enough's enough, man. It's time to move forward. It's time, you know, to stop judging people by the color of their skin, and thinking that they can't do certain things in life, or should be treated a bad way because of something, you know, somebody told you, you know, years ago.
Thanks, Nelson. And you make a good point. It's not everyone's going to react well to this. That you know, I think often we'll hear that, you know, hey, this is a political issue. Well, it's not a political issue. It's a matter of right and wrong. It's a moral issue. It's a justice issue. Jenny, can you speak to this one, please?
Sure. First, I just want to say that I'm really thankful to be part of such an amazing group. I would say I too am not one who speaks openly a lot. I'm a listener. I'm a doer. I'm a leader. by example, but really during this time of COVID, I think this moment just allowed personally for me to be, not just have the time, but to be more present and to be present in engaging in conversations, reading, learning, listening to experiences from past athletes personally, from present athletes, and just the experiences. I have a new sense of awareness, and, you know, I'm being very vulnerable and open, but it really, this time has been, it's necessary, and I'm hopeful to say, and you know, speaking amongst all the coaches, that it really has touched a lot of us, and knowing that it is time to act, and not for me to be quiet and not accept it. It's something that I've never in my 46 years have had a conversation like this with my family, with my mother, with my relatives. But it's necessary and it's important, and my commitment, just, you know, tag teaming off of everybody else, you know, we do have this time now, but when we do get back to work, when we do start getting back into our daily activities of being a mom and a wife and a head coach and a recruiter and a confidant, that it is necessary to continue these conversations. And I think more than anything, that has been very, very helpful in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jenny. And I want to stick with you for a minute here, Jenny. Over the course of, you know, not just the last couple of weeks, but over the course of your career, what are some ways, you know, kind of looking into your role as a coach, how you've been able to engage with your teams and your athletes on the topic of race and racism?
Again, being perfectly open and honest. This is my place. This is my safe place. And it's something that I really try hard to encourage and allow my team to feel like they have a voice, to be respectful of each other, to love one another. And in all honesty, growing up in the sport of gymnastics, in my 46 years, I could probably, there's a handful of Black athletes that I have worked with. Just recently, over the last, 10, 20 years, have I had the honor of working with a more diverse group of young women. And I can't say I've ever had a specific conversation on race or racism with my team. And that has changed over the last couple of years, and understand, just, I think Mary brought it up, just creating an environment of safety for my athletes. It doesn't stop there. It continues on in their life outside. And for me to educate myself, which I have, if I've learned anything over the last couple months, it's I need and have become better educated on the subject of racism, and it's just something that's necessary. I have to say that I am so very thankful to have 4 wonderful young women on my team, Black student athletes who have led many discussions. And I have, in all honesty, felt like a novice athlete amongst professional athletes. And it's hard, I was talking with Becky, it's hard to be a leader when you don't really know what you're talking about, and you don't have that knowledge and guidance. And I truly am thankful for my 4 athletes who have led conversations amongst our group and have felt comfortable just sharing thoughts, and really look forward to continuing that from here on out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, is that, we all come to this conversation, we can't necessarily control our experiences or our background in this at this time, but what we can control is that we're continuing to move forward in that. Oh, so as you all, as coaches, have these conversations with your teams, how do you see those helping? And obviously, not just in terms of athletic success, but, in providing space for young people to be able to express themselves, but also to listen to peers talking about the experiences that they've had that are different from what maybe they've experienced. Tim, can you address that?
Yeah, I think as everybody on this call has really articulated very well, and that we're all learning. And I think it doesn't really matter who you are as a head coach, you're a constant learner, and you want to constantly learn how to do things right. So some of the things we've been doing, which is really difficult when you're doing, Zoom call meetings of this magnitude, you want to make sure that you're hitting everybody in the heart and you're getting the right responses and the right dialogue and the right, compassion and empathy to everybody. But we've really done the same thing that Jenny mentioned. I brought in a couple resources of people, and one of the most impactful things that somebody said to me on our staff at the UAA, and I'm not going to call them out. I think this was a really, really, really very, very positive text the way I took it. But she said to me that it's going to take people that look like you to impact change. And no one's ever told me that in my entire life. And I always felt myself as a very empowering head coach to give my women their voice and their maturity to do things thoughtfully that they want to do. So when she said that to me, I really took that to heart. And our players have led meetings, again, through Zoom. And the initial stages just to really start to educate, share experiences, help us understand certain things like Coach Mike White mentioned about, the history books I was a history major in college, and I've learned more from my athletes here in the past month than I ever have in my entire, life as a student. And so just learning and educating. The next phase to me is the most important phase, and that's the acting part. And that's the hardest part, especially when you're talking about chemistry and you're meshing people. And I'm just talking about my small circle that hopefully will then grow and impact, like JC talked about, making a positive change. But our athletes have shared their experiences and shared some things. And now it's going to get the other 20 players on our team, that majority are white. We have a few Hispanic players on our team, but just getting everybody to understand how to impact change, whether it be using your voice, whether it be being an anti-racist, which is something I really have learned, because like most, as a coach, you coach athletes. You don't coach people by color or by, from their states or their countries. You coach athletes. And so I've got to do a better job of being an anti-racist, and I've got to do a better job. But I think the next part's going to be the hardest part, which is the act of really creating the chemistry amongst everybody to do things. So we've created a safe word or a safe phrase so that we can, if there are offensive things that are said, no matter who you are, you can ultimately have a safe word or a safe process to allow for there to be honest, true dialogue, not offensive dialogue, but to impact change, you have to drop your guard and you have to be less defensive, I think. And so I'm not looking forward to that part because it's going to be very difficult, but I am looking forward to that because it's a necessary improvement that we have to do amongst our family and our circle and our group.
Yep, and that's a great point because, the natural inclination is defensiveness a lot of times, because nobody wants to be called out necessarily, but that's part of the discomfort of it. And learning to not be defensive, like you said, I think is so important. Jenny, can you talk a little bit more on this one about, how do these conversations help, your student athletes?
Sure. Just to piggyback on what Tim said, I think it's important. I feel like we all of us coaches, do our very best to create an environment where everybody's respected and feel like they can share anything. That is definitely what I try to do. And I think knowing each other's hearts and their intentions is a huge step into this process. And just like Tim, you know, creating an environment where just through conversation that I've had with present, past, current, anybody I've spoken to, I feel like in our current situation, there's a lot of unlearning we need to do. And somebody mentioned that to me, that I need to unlearn to not just be quiet and not say anything, but to create an environment to I guess raise it to the next level. Okay, if we've created these environments, but to allow mistakes to happen in order for change to occur. If that makes any sense, and to feel safe being able to do that, because I guarantee I've made a lot of mistakes in the past. I know I have, and I'm probably going to, you know, from here on out, but I'm trying to become a better mom, a better wife, a better human being, and a better coach for my student athletes. And if something is said to them that is taken the wrong way, please don't be afraid not to say anything. You know, you may have been told don't say anything because it may hurt their feelings. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And really, I think that's just a step in the direction of continuing to help, you know, change the current climate and move forward, you know. So I think that's something that my student athletes are dedicated and really committed to doing what we can, you know, to start within our family in order to create a change on a broader perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Denver.
Yeah.
Can I just chime in there on Jenny? You know, this is a question for Nesty and Mouse and Brian. You know, as a white male, how can we help change?
Well, you know, JC, I think that the biggest thing you can do is, you know, like you've got to reprogram yourself. You got to reprogram your friends. You've got to have the tough conversations. You got to do the things you've done. You got to pick up the phone. You got to call Brian and, you know, talk to him about the things he's dealt with. You know, talk to other friends that have dealt with these things. If you see people that are doing, I mean, it's no different than if you're walking down the street and you see two guys mugging an old lady, you're going to stop them, right? So if you're talking to people and they're making racist comments, then stop them. Just tell them, no, I'm not going to engage in that nonsense. Because even if you just stand there and you don't say anything, then you're just as big a part of the problem as they are, because they think your silence is acceptance. So, you know, it's just about speaking up. It's about having a voice. And again, you're going to lose friends over this. You know, you're going to have people that don't want to be around you and be a part of your life because you're adverse to what their issues are. But the biggest thing is you have to speak up. You have to have the courage to speak up, because it's never going to stop if you don't.
I agree with Mouse. You know, dialogue is important. Doesn't matter how difficult it is, or because as many of you know, that this is a very tough thing to talk about, and some people are going to lose friends over it, and probably already have. And my thing is, if there's an issue, whatever it is, talk about it, no matter how difficult it is, because the more you hear it from our perspective, hopefully you would get it that you know, obviously we need to do things the right way, and having a dialogue is a key part of it. And now is the time.
Denver, can I interject?
Yeah.
We continue to talk about having these conversations and learning from each other and being vulnerable and educating ourselves and so on and so forth. And just popped in my head as Mouse said, silence is acceptance. And I'm writing it down. Just a great example, you know, for all of us, that we continue by having these conversations to educate each other. And thanks, Mouse, because that's 3 words, and that's what I need. I don't need many more words than that, but I can remember silence is acceptance. That's very powerful.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have anything on this before we move along? Don't want to cut anyone off. Awesome. So I want to get a little bit into, and I realize we're already at about an hour here, so we only got a couple more questions here for those of you watching. In the coach, this is a little bit of a three-part question, but in the coaching profession, what are some of the unique challenges that Black coaches experience in climbing the ranks? And as part of that, what is the advice that you would give to up-and-coming Black coaches? And also, what are the steps that either your sport or athletic departments can take to create more equitable opportunities? So Mouse, can you address one or all of those?
Sure.
There's a lot in that, I know.
There is a lot in there. I think, well, obviously the very first unique challenge that we face is the color of our skin, and the fact that there are just, administrators and people out there, even head coaches or whatever, that think that because of the color of our skin, they've been told that we're not smart enough or intelligent enough, or whatever word you want to use to do the job that's required, which is ludicrous in itself. I think that we have to, if I'm going to give advice to an up-and-coming coach, the thing I'm going to tell them is be overly prepared. When you walk into a meeting, when you walk into that interview, you have to go in there and you have to absolutely knock it out of the park, because if you don't, if you leave one I undotted, one T uncrossed, that's more than likely going to be held against you at some point in time. Too many times I think that, we hear about, the NFL or the NBA or whatever entity that's going to make sure that more African-American coaches get interviewed. The interview process is not the problem. And just interviewing someone because they're Black is offensive to me. I want you to interview me because I'm qualified for the job, not because of the color of my skin. So in talking to young Black coaches, I tell them, I don't want you to go out and try to get a job and have somebody hire you because you're Black. Be hireable because you're qualified. So if you want to be a head coach, then go out and be the best assistant coach you can be and show people that you have the skill set to be a great head coach. And again, don't want to be hired just because of the color of your skin, because that's going to lead to you getting fired anyway. And I think that's another issue we have as African-American coaches. We don't get as many chances. We don't. And I tell the African-American coaches, when you get the good job, you better bust your butt. You better keep it, because it's not very likely you're going to get another chance to get another one if you get fired or if you mess up. It's just the second chances just aren't there.
Now, Brian, can you address this one?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Denver. My advice, to any coach, but especially a Black coach that's trying to get into our sport, is really, you got to find the separators. You got to find the things that are going to separate you from the pack. I mean, that's just kind of, for anyone who wants to be successful in anything, whether it's an athlete, a coach, whatever. And I think Mouse alluded to that, is that, yeah, you got to go in prepared, and you got to understand how you're going to impact people, how you're going to impact the people that you're interviewing with, how you're going to impact the program once you get the chance to lead it or be a part of it, and how you're going to impact the community around that. And I think that it's just so important for young people to understand that, yes, sometimes the odds may be stacked against you if you're a Black American. But what can you do? Can you network? That's important. I think that when I think about hate, I think about what my dad used to say: hate comes from fair. Hate comes from fair. And it's that people just don't know. And they're afraid of what they don't know because they haven't been exposed, they haven't been around it. JC's asking, what can we do? Get your kids to play with other Black kids, with other Chinese kids, with other diverse kids, and they'll start to get an understanding that people are people. We are all one race. Serena Williams said the other day on one of her tweets, we're all one race, the human race. And as we get our kids to really understand that, hopefully we can change the next generation, which will change the generations afterward. So for young coaches, it's find ways to separate yourself and be special. you know, and so that they get to know who you are from the inside. Because when people get to know you from the inside, they stop looking at the outside. It's like your wife or your husband or whatever. It's like after a while, you start seeing them for who they really are on the inside. And so I think that's what the advice that I would give. Sure, there's some challenges along the way. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. But we can't focus in on those things. And we've got to be less judgmental of the process and be open to giving everybody a fair shake and getting to know people. Because if I'm a young black coach and I've got an attitude going in thinking that the odds are stacked against me, and I bring that attitude to my interview, or I just bring it out when I'm out recruiting with the other coaches, or I'm in my environment, I got to understand that that's not going to help me get to where I want to be. And so part of the deal is learning how to manipulate. I mean, it's just the honest truth, and figuring out how to get forward and how to get ahead. And so what I've always found, that if you do the things that Coach Nesty was talking about earlier, the golden rule, if you treat people the way you want to be treated, if you make sure that you're honest and respectful, you do those things, people are going to start to get to know your heart and know what you're about, and they're going to want to be around that. And so for young coaches, that's huge. It's huge. Drop the attitude, get in there, get to know people, don't judge. We're all human. We're all part of the same thing, and love and respect everybody.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Brian. Mike White.
Yeah, hey, Denver, I don't know that I have great advice, but definitely some observations.
Yeah.
Specific to our sport in men's basketball, more than anything. 80 of 336 non-HBCU programs in our country. 80 of 336 are black head coaches at 24% in a predominantly black sport. 8 of 65 black head coaches at Power 5 schools, that's 12%. 8 of 65 black athletic directors at Power 5 schools at 12%. 2 black SEC basketball coaches as head coaches, and 1 black SEC head football coach, if those numbers are correct. And it's not equitable. It's not right. Most presidents are white. Most search firms are white. There's a lot of white people hiring white people. And I'm privileged to be one of them. And black coaches, young black coaches, have to overcome that. That's just the reality of it. There's some really qualified people of all colors, and they've got to overcome a lot. What advice? Minimal advice. Overcome labels. I work with Al Pinkins and Darius Nichols and Jordan Mincy, and I'm shocked that they haven't had opportunities to be head coaches. They're head coaches in waiting somewhere. But they haven't they've been interviewed. And the challenge for all of us and for all the people that I just talked about is to not interview, but to hire people that are elite at what they do, and that are great people, and that are ready. Other advice, young black coaches, to overcome the labels that people that look like you are recruiters and people that look like me are X and O guys, which is complete nonsense. I can recruit, and Coach Pinkins and Coach Mincy and Coach Nichols, they can coach. Joint staffs will allow you to grow and develop in all areas, and don't allow yourself to be boxed in. Challenge your coworkers, educate your coworkers, develop relationships with administrators and search firms. And then for all of us, consider entry-level positions allocated to minorities in both our sport and in administration. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's again challenging ourselves to hire people of color.
Thanks, Becky. Do you have something here?
Well, I think Mike covered a lot of ground there, which is really informative. Thanks, Mike. But I think about it as a systemic issue too. I look at my sport. Women's soccer is traditionally not very diverse. I think there's 528 Division I soccer programs, and I think there are 16 black head coaches total. And on the women's side, I believe there are 4. And I think that the biggest issues are like when you look at our sport, I'd go all the way back to like, what are the barriers to Black players playing our sport? And so if they have barriers to getting in the sport, clearly they're not getting to be coaches, and clearly they're not getting to be administrators. And I think really taking a hard look at what are the barriers going backwards. And then I also would just like to add, I think Mike sort of touched on this already, but I was on a call the other night, and Linda Teeler mentioned about gatekeepers. Like, who are the gatekeepers, and why are the gatekeepers keeping out Black people from these positions, and how does that change? And I think until we're willing to really address that issue, I'm not sure there is going to be a lot of change, but I think it's going backwards.
Yeah, access is so important. That's absolutely right. So, obviously there are many challenges that we're talking about, but one of the things that helps spur action forward is hope. And so I'd like to wrap us up by talking about where are some places where you all see hope in regards to, the topic of racial justice. Brian, would you start for us there?
Yeah, I think, boy, I see it in the faces that I'm looking at right now on the screen. I start there. I'm super inspired by, someone talked about vulnerability earlier, and I can't help but think about Ginny Rowland there, and listening to her speak and feeling the emotion that she's feeling, and to know that, she's not an African-American woman, but she's feeling that same emotion. I was on a call recently with our SEC head coaches. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and one of the program coordinators for the women's side was speaking, and she's an African-American lady, and someone, one of the coaches asked her, tell us what you've been feeling, what you've been thinking. And she let loose, she let loose, and understandably so. She was just so emotional about it, about where we are as a country, and the things that are going on, and what she's dealt with. And for her to be able to have a voice, to listen to Jenny's voice, to listen to Emily's voice, to hear Mary and Becky and everybody speak, just tells me that there is a lot to hope for, here. There's people that have never, ever taken the time or used any energy in having these types of conversations with their own families at home. Those conversations are starting to happen. That gives me hope. Hope that my daughter, who I would call more of an introvert, has joined a Black coalition with other Division I tennis players across the country that are Black, to figure out how they can make a difference in each of their respective schools, in their athletic departments. And to see her grow through this process, I mean, that's worth a lot, but it gives me hope, that someone that didn't really have a voice at all now has found a voice and wants to use it, so just everyone here, my own family, the conversations that are happening, the movement. It's not just a moment. That makes me proud that this thing continues forward, that it's not just for a minute. It's something that we can keep going, on and on, and change will eventually happen. I don't know that it'll happen with people that are a little bit older, that are more set in their ways, but I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the next generations to come. I'm worried about my kids and their kids and the kids that they have, that they're going to have a better opportunity because of the changes that are happening here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Becky, can you weigh in on the topic of hope?
Well, I definitely have a lot of hope for the next generation. Personally, I feel a little disappointed in my generation because I feel like we're a big part of the problem, but I see a whole different view of that going forward. I look at, it's going to be very exciting to be on a college campus this fall to see the energy around this and how people are taking the cause up and trying to make change. And to me, the fact that people are willing to step up and do that, and I think it's been mentioned multiple times on this call about white people marching with black people and people having voices that have never had voices before. I think all of those things are happening in the younger generation, and that's super exciting.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Becky. I want to give real quick before we go to Mouse for the last word. Was there anybody else who wanted to weigh in? I want to make sure we don't cut anybody off here.
Yeah, Denver, if you don't mind, please.
Sure.
I think there's been a lot of hope for us with the conversations we have with our team and hearing the young people and what they want to do to become more educated, what they want to do to be more active, what they want to do to just make change, and how they ask for help. I think that's been great, just hearing, the younger generation, like people are referencing, and what they want to do and how we can help educate them, but not only educate them, but support them and stand along their side to help change happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Cam. All right, we'll go to Mouse here for the last word.
All right, thanks, Denver. I'm gonna kind of wrap this up with a few things. One thing is that JC talked about his daughter, and I think that's a great example that this is not a learned behavior. This is a learned behavior. I apologize. People aren't born this way, and I think we have to continue to lean on the child and see continue to have those childlike behaviors and the childlike hope. There's been a lot of talk about change, and we've experienced a conflict. We're experiencing the resolution now, and I'm just very hopeful that the change will come. I'm okay, but as Brian said, I'm worried about my children's children and their children, and hope that the change will continue to move forward. And ultimately, guys, my hope just centers around my faith, and I'm just very prayerful, and will continue to be that hope that people will learn to love others no matter what your race, creed, or color is. If we will learn to love others as God loves us, if we will love each other with the love of Christ, with the love of God, and no matter what your race is, we'll all be fine. And that's my hope, and I'm going to lean on that hard every day. And I'm sorry for getting a little bit emotional, but this is hard, guys. It is. It really is. So that's all I got, Denver, because I'm going to start crying, and I'm not going to be at work for 2 months. So.
Thanks so much, Mouse. I want to thank all of you, for your candor, for your insight, for your vulnerability, and talking about this is an important conversation, and I know we'll continue to carry it forward as we each go out into our own spots. So thank you all. Thank you to those of you who took the time to watch today. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Go Gators.